The Secrets of Movies and TV Shows is brought to you by the StarQuest Production Network and is made possible by our many generous patrons. If you'd like to support the podcast, please visit sqpn.com/give.
You're listening to The Secrets of Movies and TV Shows. Hi, I'm Robert King, and you're listening to The Secrets of Black Panther, Wakanda Forever, where we're looking at the hidden layers and deeper meanings of this highly anticipated 2022 entry into the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Joining me on the panel today are Angela Sealana. Hi, Angela.
Hey, Robert. Great to be here.
Right on. Great to have you. Also, Andrew Hermiz.
Hello, hello.
Good to have you back. And today we have a special guest, Bill Field. Welcome, Bill.
Hey, thank you guys. Thank you for having me.
Well, it's great to have you. So, as I said, we're talking about Wakanda Forever. Now, most of the reviews I read focused on the idea of this film as a tribute to Chadwick Boseman, who played the Black Panther in previous Marvel outings and who passed away unexpectedly in 2020. And that is a prominent and a worthy aspect of the film for sure. But there's a lot more that's going on, and we're looking forward to unpacking all of that in this podcast. For those who haven't seen it, I want to give a brief summary of the film. Here's your spoiler warning in case you need one. Wakanda Forever begins with Shuri trying to save her brother T'Challa from some unspecified disease by replicating the heart-shaped herb which was destroyed in the first Black Panther movie. She fails, and the whole nation mourns the loss of their king. But the rest of the world starts looking for ways to gain an advantage over Wakanda, which is now revealed to have the most advanced technology in the world. In particular, the US is searching for vibranium, the unique metal that makes Wakandan tech possible, and they're searching for it all over the world. They discover some of it on the floor of the Atlantic Ocean. That expedition is attacked, and the US blames Wakanda, but surprise, it was actually a group of people who live underwater and are led by Kukulkan, or as his enemies call him, Namor. They are a Mayan people who ate a vibranium-infused plant to save themselves from the conquistadors, which somehow turned them into water breathers. Now, Kukulkan is a mutant who ages more slowly and can still breathe air and can fly. So he's special even among his own people. I think I'll call him Namor for the rest of this because that's how he's referred to in the original comics, and it's a little easier for me to say. Namor rather aggressively proposes an alliance with Wakanda to keep vibranium from falling into normal people's hands. They particularly want the American scientist who developed a vibranium detector. Her name is Riri Williams. From here, the movie chases Riri and Shuri around as they negotiate whether an alliance between them is worthwhile and whether Riri should be kept alive. Namor wants to kill Riri and have an alliance to make war on the surface world. But Shuri wants to keep Riri alive and maintain peace with other nations. But this is a Marvel movie, so fighting is inevitable. Namor and his army attack Wakanda, and they kill Shuri's mother, Queen Ramonda. Shuri then recreates the heart-shaped herb and becomes the new Black Panther. She rallies Wakanda to counterattack with a special plan to defeat the apparently undefeatable Namor. In the fight, she has an opportunity to kill him, but she gives him the chance to yield and form a peaceful arrangement. Finally, Shuri can accept the deaths of her brother and her mother and move on with her own life. Did I leave anything out, guys? It was a long movie, and I tried to kind of get the important things in as compactly as I could there.
That was a great summary.
That was really good. Yeah. You did that in a short amount of time.
So, as I said, there is a lot to talk about, but let's maybe start at the obvious place. This is a movie that's largely driven by grief that's largely driven by grief and loss. And the first, of course, is the one that everyone has been talking about. This movie is kind of a massive tribute to Chadwick Boseman, who played T'Challa in the first several outings. What were your experiences of Chadwick Boseman and of the movie as a tribute to him?
Yeah, as far as the Chadwick Boseman of it all, I think the movie is sort of bookended, with really great sort of tributes to Chadwick Boseman and the Prince T'Challa, King T'Challa, I should say. And I think the rest of the movie, between the middle and the end, you really feel a Chadwick Boseman sized hole in it. I feel, and that's something I think you can't escape. Honestly, I'm surprised that they even were able to pull off this film. I think that withstanding, I still enjoyed the film overall. It has its sort of issues that we'll get into, but as far as a tribute to Chadwick and the Black Panther character, I thought, again, the beginning and the end, in the beginning, I thought it was an interesting and really sort of cool perspective or sort of a way of storytelling to show the sort of frantic nature of like, a loved one that's about to die. It like right away the movie opens and it's, Shuri's just trying to find a cure and she's that's all her mind is set on, and she hasn't allowed herself to accept the inevitable. And it looks like, her mother has, and everyone around her, everyone in Wakanda sort of saw this coming, and she was the one that was doing everything she could. I mean, that's totally relatable and understandable. I think if you had a brother, a family member that was going through that, and there was a slight possibility that you could maybe do something, like you would probably do it until the end. And I liked how it showed how like, I've been in a hospital, with a loved one, on their deathbed, and it can be frantic like that, and there's a lot of emotions and a lot of things going on. So I like how Ryan Coogler chose to tell that part of the story. And obviously at the end, with Shuri finally, coming to peace throughout her journey in the film, and the touching sort of tribute to King T'Challa, where we find out that he has a son out there, and that he's named after him. So that was, the beginning and the end of the movie, like, wrecked me. So it was very emotional, and I thought it was very touching. So I thought they handled, as far as like the question you're asking, the honoring Chadwick, I thought they handled it really, really well.
Yeah, they did a really good job with the difficult task of like taking that outside event and kind of translating it into movie terms without making it like take over the movie in a way. Angela, you were going to say something.
Yeah, well, Andrew really set me up very well, because on that scene, when Ramonda and Shuri are at the riverbank, and Ramonda is trying to help Shuri grieve her loss, there is an elephant and its child by the river. And by doing some little research, I was watching the 2020 special called Black Panther in Search of Wakanda, which you can also find on Disney Plus. And that they mention that the main Wakanda song that was made for the Black Panther movies is actually about an elephant dying and the mourning of the elephant, and that the elephant's child will rise up to take its place. And so, of course, we got that theme in the very first Black Panther with T'Challa's father dying, and now here we have T'Challa himself dying. And so it's kind of poetic in a sad and tragic way that both of these movies had a death, and the second not being planned, but originally, of course. But to see them include that that allegory or metaphor visually as well as sonically, with that iconic Wakanda song and that moving vocalization. But then also just watching the cast, talk about T'Challa in the movie and seeing their emotions when they're saying, that it how it hurt them, their character. You could really, I think I felt some of their own personal emotion, having lost Chadwick. So I think, that added to the movie in a way that you can't really, you can't make that up, so I'm sure that was partially why I think this movie ended up being one of my favorite, Marvel movies, just overall, probably number one right now.
That sense of catharsis with, it almost seems like making the movie may have been a process of grieving for the production crew and so on, all those who had worked with Chadwick before. Bill, anything you'd like to add on the topic of Chadwick and the film as a tribute?
I'm going to say something extremely unpopular right now. I think they should have recast the role. The reason being is his story goes on to be so much more, and with Marvel, the MCU now appropriating the X-Men franchise, he and Storm, who are married in the comics, could have had that opportunity. Now that they've done this, they're going to have to figure other things out, but it will never happen. And that made me sad in a way, because that's a big part of his story, and their relationship is one of the more important parts of his timeline, I would say. So, but honestly, I liked the movie a lot. I thought they should have gotten someone to play, someone younger to play Riri Williams, because she's supposed to be 13 to 15 in the comics. And this actress was definitely not that young, probably by a long shot. I haven't looked up her age, but I know she was an adult, not a kid. But they play her young, but it just didn't seem quite right to me. Sure, he seems much younger than her, and sure, he's supposed to be a good probably 5 to 6 years older than her. So, but I'm also a stickler in a weird way, not in a weird way, but in a comic historian way, because I came equipped with trivial stuff. I say trivial meaning trivia, but it might be trivial to our discussion. I don't know. But did you realize that the Black Panther premiered 6 months before the group, the Black Panthers, formed? So the Black Panther,
the comic book, you mean?
Yeah, well, not the comic book. He made an appearance in the Fantastic Four, and that was his first appearance. And they decided to put a full mask on him because they were afraid of the backlash from the South of a black character being foremost on a cover. Because if you look at that cover, you'll see that he's prominent in the Fantastic Four in the background, which was something that was relatively rare in the early run. So, and so he his just being there influenced so much. He was not exactly the first black superhero, but he was damn close. They've retconned a lot of this stuff now to where you have characters that were created more recently, but they put them in the past. But seriously, he's the first one that anyone took seriously. And he stands out for so many reasons. And then Namor is actually the oldest Marvel comic character. He first appeared in 1939, and he had a great run in the 40s, but he first appeared in what was going to be a giveaway at movie theaters across America called Motion Pictures Comics Weekly. And it was created by Bill Everett. And Bill Everett also did the end of the original run of Submariner from Marvel in the early 70s. And so he kind of had the bookends of the most important parts of his history. But he created a character that was very, very unlike the character we see in this movie. His ego is the same. His powers are pretty close. I was a little, what bothered me the most that was never in the comics, although I liked it, but it seemed too easy a weapon to use, was the siren song. That really bothered Angela.
I loved that.
Did you
so
really?
Of course, I don't know the comics, but I love that just from the Greek mythology.
I mean, if it had been in the comics, it would have been easier for me to accept. I thought it was an easy pass for them to get through stuff. Let's just
just to be clear, you're saying that in the because I'm not a big reader of the comics, that siren song that they were using doesn't appear in the comics much?
Not that I'm aware of, no.
So to me, I think as from a film perspective, it creates this sense of dread of a people that is so mysterious, because it's part of how they're introduced, right? It's creating the sense of, oh my gosh, who are these people, when we have to buy their how dangerous they are because they're brand new to the story. So that was one of the reasons why I really liked that part of it. And I also wonder if they were bringing in just with the Mayan and Aztec influence, like how song was a part of the culture. So who knows?
Yeah.
But
well, no, that makes a lot of sense from that standpoint. In the and by the way, this is again trivial trivia, but they got Namor's name. They wanted something. This is in 1939, of course. They wanted something regal for the Submariner, and what they did was they just took Roman and turned it backwards. So Namor is Roman backwards. So you can't get more regal than that, can you, folks? And I have to say this quick joke. Well, not joke, but my uncle had told me, and my uncle was like this quote unquote smart guy in the family. He worked high up in the State Department, and he was convinced since he was a child that you pronounced it Submariner. And this guy was really smart. But everyone I told that to said, oh no, it's Submariner. And I thought Submariner, and the cartoon, it was Submariner. So I was convinced, and I kept telling him. So I was 14 years old. I went to a convention and I met Stan Lee for the first time. I would meet Stan every 7 years after that until Stan died, sadly. But what was funny is I went up to him and I said, look, my uncle is convinced it's Submariner for all these years since he was a kid. And he goes, well, Billy, I hate to tell you, but your uncle's been wrong for many, many years. and so I told my uncle that, and he goes, how can this be? And he wasn't used to being wrong. And so this is why I loved being on here tonight, because I wanted to tell that story, because it's, to me, that I can't think of Submariner without Submariner now. It's indented in my brain, but then I did want to bring up one more thing about Black Panther that not many people know. He's one of the few comic book superheroes who has fought the Ku Klux Klan.
Interesting.
Okay.
And they got around it, and it still carried the Comics Code Authority, stamp on the cover, but they got around it by calling them the CLAN clan. And but it was very evident it was, the the K clan. But I can't believe I'm saying it. It was the K clan, not the C clan. But yeah. But it was really an amazing set. And I gotta look at my notes real quick. And Killmonger also appeared within the same series. It was called Jungle Action. Don McGregor, he's the guy. He's actually a white guy, but he worked together with Billy Graham, who was not the evangelist, but Billy Graham, the black comic artist, who was fantastic and worked on a lot of the early issues of Luke Cage, which became Luke Cage Hero for Hire, which became Luke Cage Power Man. But Billy Graham kind of made sure that this stuff wasn't like blaxploitation, as was all the rage. He gave all the characters that they worked on, including Black Goliath, for Marvel. He helped them have respect and understanding without being like, Shuggy Bear from, the TV, the 70s Starsky and Hutch, where every black guy at that time was like a pimp. And and that's downright racist. But Marvel did an awful lot to give people of color something to really be proud of. And that's mainly due to Billy Graham.
Well, that is some amazing history. And I mean, definitely we're looking at characters who have really strong roots in the history of comics, and they have this great tradition. We also know that Marvel Studios has felt pretty free to play fast and loose with the comics canon. And so I don't know, in talking about Marvel films, like I said, I'm not a big comics reader myself, but several of my friends are, and it's always that line of, okay, how much do you look at it as an adaptation of particular comics, and how much do you look at it as kind of its own story?
100%. That's what I had to reckon with when they first started coming out, because one day I had this epiphany where, you know what, the MCU is Marvel on the big screen. Of course, they're going to have to make changes and adaptations to get it up there, like they did for DC with Watchmen. They played a little fast and loose with a couple of major elements, but it still worked. But in
Watchmen, surprisingly, is probably the most accurate, comic book, I guess, film.
Watchmen.
Because you've compared it to like we're talking about, like the MCU and the DCU. They take a lot of liberties. I mean, Zack Snyder pretty much used the comic as a storyboard, and obviously there was a couple big changes that he made, but I thought, as far as from comic to film, from comic to screen, I thought Watchmen is pretty accurate.
Oh no, I agree with you 100%. Yeah. It's one of my favorite comic book movies, and I think it's very faithful to the original material. Yeah, without a doubt.
Well, it's clear that for Wakanda Forever, they felt like they had to. I mean, with many of the other Marvel movies, they seem to draw heavily on inspiration from particular comics, but this one, I think they were really striking out in a new direction, and I think a lot of that was due to the untimely passing of Chadwick Boseman, which forced them. I mean, agree or disagree with their decision, they made it pretty early on not to recast the role.
And I understand why they did it. I just wish they hadn't, just strictly for what's still there for him. And I don't know how
for the
they can get
character of
back
Black
to
Panther.
That. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
I think, I kind of, I was always at odds with that decision, when they came out and made it. It's like, it's hard to see someone other than Chadwick play the role, but at the same time, like, I kind of agree with you. Like, you want to see the Black Panther character, specifically T'Challa, you want to see his story grow. But I think Marvel, kind of having his son having the same name at the end, I think they gave themselves sort of
an out.
Like, hey, the Black Panther character is going to live on through this kid. And with the whole like multiverse and how they can play with time, they can immediately jump forward and make him older and have again, it's all speculation, but I think they specifically made that choice at the end to have his son named T'Challa to further that character along. And I hope that they do.
Yeah. Although I have to say, I am pretty invested in Shuri and where her character is going. And how she's going to take the Black Panther mantle forward. And this movie really is kind of Shuri's journey, isn't it? I mean, it starts with her and it ends with her, and it like that journey that she goes on from like, I will stop questioning your existence, Bast, at the beginning, to fulfilling the traditions of her ancestors at the end. It's quite an arc, and it's one I think that is resonant. At least it was for me, and I think for many Catholics and Christians out there, that it's essentially a conversion story, and it's not a normal one. It's a conversion through the process of grief. I wonder, do you have thoughts about that journey that she went on? I know, Angela, maybe you can start us off.
I have a lot of thoughts, because honestly, this was one of the biggest themes that I guess moved me personally. And I actually spoke to somebody after watching the movie about the moment where Shuri and Ramonda are talking. Again, going back to that riverbank scene, which is awesome.
Great scene, yeah.
Yeah. And Ramonda is kind of walking Shuri through, how to grieve, and that she needs to grieve. She's like, you need to sit here with me and with yourself in order to have peace. And how many of us today don't take that time because, I got to go to work, or I've got to, fulfill my responsibilities. And a lot of times, just the capitalist societies that a lot of us live in just don't allow for that. And so I think for Shuri to not be allowing herself and being kind of relying on her technology is very relatable for people that may be watching. But, Ramonda's kind of going through this ritual with her, and it really rooted that moment in, what are our ancestors' wisdom, and what do they encourage us to do? Is like they've passed on these rituals for us to heal, to be able to find, fulfillment in our humanity and some kind of peace. And so she's going through this beautiful ritual of, I found your brother in the wind. And then Shuri's like, no, that was just a construct of your mind, so you could feel comfort or joy. And when I was talking to that person I mentioned, they were really struck by what Ramonda's response was. And it was really convicting for this person I was talking to. She says, what construct does your mind create when you think of your brother? Does it offer you comfort or torment? And I think a lot of people, a lot of us have those moments where we maybe have put the importance of our mind and being rational over what is spiritual and what is in many ways, being a whole human being. So those are just a few of my thoughts on Shuri's journey.
I loved that response to I loved that Ramonda didn't deny the whole mental construct idea, but she kind of incorporated it into her perception of spirituality and grief, and in a very both and way that I loved.
I think it's pretty clear that from a Catholic stance, the clearest message to me was your journey through suffering and what suffering can bring to yourself and others, and that it's not a bad thing, and it's part of your evolution of your own story, and especially when you're doing it as a movie. Of course, you have all these things that have affected Shuri. Then, on top of everything else, she loses her mother, and so she suffers and suffers, and she's like, it's almost like Job. It's like she goes through a Job-like transformation almost, where she says, come on, what else are you going to do to me? And she couldn't take it anymore. And I thought that's when she had the breakthrough. And I think for a lot of us that do believe in Christ, I think a lot of us go through that sometimes, and where everything hits at once, and you're like, hey, you're supposed to be looking out for me. And then when you get out on the other side, you realize he was. And, but it's never the way you think it's going to be, and you shouldn't try to second guess them, for sure. And that's something I'm very guilty of, by the way. So,
yeah, I think all of us are in some way.
No doubt.
I loved the line that Baku said to her at her mother's funeral. You've lost too much for anyone to consider you a child, and that really resonated as well.
Isn't that a strong message? I mean, it's so true. And she's actually in her early to mid 20s as a character, so she's not really a child anyway. But they're starting to see her as, even though she isn't going to take the mantle of Queen of Wakanda, it shows that she will have power in the new Wakanda one way or another because of who she is and what her lineage is. I really do like the different factions you have in Wakanda, the apes versus the panthers, basically. It almost sounds like a football, game. The gorillas versus the panthers tonight. But that's the thing, and they tried really hard to bring that to the land of Namor, which I hate to say what they're calling it now because it's always been Atlantis in the comics, and so I don't have a problem with the way they went with it, but I'm still struggling with pronouncing all the new names.
I'll say it for you, Bill. Just point at me and I'll.
Okay, thank you, Angela. That's so sweet of you. But no, I really thought this movie was the Namor show. Quite frankly, I felt like he got more screen time than pretty much anyone. They went overboard. Here's what I think. Namor was originally supposed to first appear in Doctor Strange #2, believe it or not. And
that's right,
that didn't happen.
In the MCU's planning?
Right.
Yeah, originally.
Okay,
yeah. And I believe they shuffled things around when they realized Chadwick Boseman had died. And they thought, okay, we can't recast Black Panther, but we can have the journey of the new Black Panther around the story of Namor, which, honestly, I was captivated by a lot of the Namor stuff, but I did think the movie ran a little bit too long. I thought they tried to pack a little bit. It was not a short
movie.
No, it was almost 3 hours.
I know. That's a good point.
The ones I really like are short. And it's not because they're short. It's like, I believe, like the first Doctor Strange movie was rather short. I believe, the shortest thing they've done is the Werewolf by Night Halloween special, which was under an hour, but it seemed like 2 hours because it was such a wonderful story. And
that was good. I enjoyed that.
It definitely had some religious implications, in it, which I like. Marvel does not shy away. If you look at what they've done with Daredevil on television, you'll see Marvel has not shied away from religion if it's part of the character's makeup. And Matt Murdock was always a devout Catholic, and they really do portray him that way. And they do it, in my opinion, they do it in a way that is not insulting at all to Catholics. I really feel like someone's in there making sure they don't, do something stupid. If that makes sense.
Can I kind of break in here, because as you're talking about the religious themes and also about Shuri's journey with Namor, as I say, one of the things that
I like that.
For anybody who's completely new to this, I'm like, my dad is Mexican with indigenous blood. So the cool thing that I got to do in preparing for this is to go back to that Aztec and Mayan wisdom. And one of the cool things is that if you're talking about Namor and you're talking about him as the feather serpent god of the Mayan people and the Aztec people, as well as specifically the Mexica people, for the Aztec people, I know, they called Kukulkan, their name for him was Quetzalcoatl. And they believed that we could all become like Quetzalcoatl if we reach a freedom of spirit and self-actualization. So to think about how Shuri's journey goes all the way to the end, and she, like you were just saying, has this moment of, oh my gosh, there's nothing worse that can happen to me now. And she has this almost like revelation from the ancestors, right? Like her mother coming back from the ancestral plane, telling her, show him who you are. To me, it's like she's the one that becomes the Quetzalcoatl, the feather serpent god, the Kukulkan. She's the one who becomes that because she reaches that point before Namor reaches that point. Because Namor is all about, revenge and seeking that kind of, he does want to protect his people, right? But at the same time, he's also playing that revenge game. And so that's kind of the spiritual irony that I'm realizing now as we're talking is like, well, Shuri's the one that actually reaches that Quetzalcoatl, like spiritual fulfillment, at the end of the movie. I'm
not even sure that Namor reaches it himself.
Yeah.
Oh, he doesn't. Yeah, I think I think they made it a point to make Namor like if obviously he's the villain of the movie, and by the end of it, he's at best like a gray area type of character. Obviously he respects the decision that Shuri made to not kill him and not take vengeance on his people. I think he saw the reasoning behind that and respected it. But yeah, I think Namor has to lives in that gray area. I think ultimately he's not going to be a villain. I mean, in the comics, Bill, you can speak to this. He's not really like always just a straight black and white villain.
No.
He's a hero. He teams up with the heroes. You can tell. I mean, obviously his journey in the film, you empathize with his character, obviously, because of what him and his people have gone through. And Angela, I thought that was a very sort of cool bit of research that you did, into making the point that Shuri, becomes the feather serpent god in a way. And I thought, like, obviously that turning point for her is like when she goes to the ancestral plane and she sees Killmonger instead of, her brother or her father.
Gosh, that was great. That was a great
that was
writing.
A beautiful decision and piece of, like you said, Angel, piece of writing that, like everyone expects, like, oh, what are they going to do? Like, is this going to be like Chadwick Boseman, CGI deep fake, or is it going to, maybe you'll see like the back of his head, and it's played by a different actor. Maybe she'll just see her father. But I thought that the choice to bring Killmonger was great, because you thought like she went through like hell, like her within like the span of a year, her dad dies, her brother dies, and her mom just died. And now she goes to this ancestral plane expecting to see them, and then they're not there. Killmonger's there.
Yeah.
And then she's like, she's like voicing her turmoil to him. Like she wants vengeance. She wants retribution. And she could have easily became the villain. And obviously she makes the right choice, the Black Panther choice, right? The choice that, being Wakanda's protector and not Wakanda's, assassin, or, she made the right choice. And I think, that was a beautiful way for her sort of journey to wrap up. It's like you said, Bill, it's like Jonah's story, like how much suffering can you bear, but obviously the reward that comes out of all that suffering is you come out of it. How she comes out of it, I mean, where she really does become Wakanda's protector. She gets to do it on her own terms, which is nice. She doesn't have to be queen, I think that would have been out of character for her. So I thought that was a good choice as well. She obviously finishes she goes through that grieving process, like we were saying. So, I thought that was handled very well and was told in a very unique way.
Yeah, and it was tied up with, the how to grieve and the who she was expecting and her whole belief in the ancestral realm and the gods of her tradition was tied up with these ethical questions, right? With questions of on the one hand, justice versus vengeance, and maybe, I don't know if mercy fits in there at all, but on the other hand, also with questions of loyalty and even nationalism. And these are questions that the first Black Panther movie dealt with pretty directly as well. And so seeing her really wrestle with like these ethical questions on a very emotional level was moving for me.
The other thing that's cool is that she has gone to the ancestral plane at that point from an artificially created heart-shaped herb. And so it's and she's not really 100% believing either. So there's all of those factors coming into play, and it's sort of like, again, the idea of faith. Like, how much faith do you need to have that experience, right? To have that spiritual experience. Like sometimes people go to like maybe more of like a charismatic type of, church service, and there will be slaying in the spirit where someone is so overcome by, the Holy Spirit that they will just fall, right? You've seen it probably on TV, but there's also like Catholic charismatic stuff as well that I've been part of. And there's this level that something that happens like in our brain or in our spirit, our body, are those disconnected? Are they connected? Like, I think as Catholics, we would say we're a unified whole, right? We're not just pieces of pieces kind of put together like a sandwich. But there's this idea of like, how do those all intermingle with each other, right? Like, how much does her faith and her, like, the artificialness of this heart-shaped herb kind of play into that of who she actually sees when she gets to that sort of experience, right? So I thought that was kind of a fascinating aspect of it too.
The whole tradition versus technology, and like every aspect of Shuri's character, I thought was so well developed in this. And even her reaction coming out of the trance, when she takes the heart-shaped herb, and she comes out and they say, "Who did you see?" And her immediate instinct is kind of a furious denial because she didn't get to see what she wanted.
Mm-hmm.
And
That's
I don't
so
know, my own
relatable.
experience. Oh yeah. My own experience of the spiritual life is like, I almost never get what I want from God when I ask. Doesn't mean I don't get good things, but
Right.
what I want is not usually even on the table.
That's a Rolling Stones song, isn't it?
Yeah, it could be. Yeah.
You can't always get what you want. Is that Rolling Stones?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yes.
But you get what you need.
Yep. That's so biblical. I mean, to me, I've always thought of that song as biblical.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And a lot of their stuff had like sympathy for the devil was very biblical in a way. I mean,
in a different way.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, a major biblical character nonetheless. But they also had they also had a lot of songs early on that were from more blues based, and some of them had a little bit of God in them, more so than anything the Beatles ever did, really. Except for maybe Let It Be and that kind of stuff.
Okay, so you brought up sympathy for the devil. So speaking of Namor, so his ears are pointed, and like he's called the Spanish man of faith, as it says in the movie, calls him a devil or a demon or something like that. So are his ears pointed in the comics?
Yeah. Oh, yes.
And was that meant to be like some kind of devilish like characteristic, or was that just...
Well, he was always kind of a raging character like Wolverine, or Wolverine was always like him because he came much later, of course. But he was always kind of on the edge and caught between loving the surface people and hating the surface people. And then what he used to have in the middle years, like in the mid to late 40s, his head was almost perfectly triangular, and it looked weird. It looked really, really weird. And then when Jack Kirby kind of revised the character, when he reappeared in the Silver Age, as they call it in comics, from the Golden Age, was just where he first appeared. His first Silver Age appearance was in Fantastic Four #4. And he was one of the first characters. He actually was the first Golden Age character that they brought back to the Marvel Age. Then he was quickly followed by Captain America. And, actually, you can argue there was a Human Torch in the 40s, but the Human Torch in the Fantastic Four was not that Human Torch. And that Human Torch was an android from the 40s also. And they haven't even gotten to him in the MCU yet. But in Fantastic Four #4, Johnny Storm goes to a flop house, and they keep, he's reading an old Submariner comic, and they go, "This guy over here reminds me of that guy you're talking about, kid." And he goes over there, and there's Namor with the full beard and mustache, and Human Torch takes his finger and on fire, and shaves him real quick. And he goes, "My golly, it is the Submariner." And then he does the most stupid thing he can do. He goes and he drops him in the water. And he had amnesia before that for years. He drops him in the water. And Namor. And Namor comes up and goes, "Now I remember, I wanted to kill everybody in the surface world," or basically, that kind of thing. And Johnny's going,
move,
"Oh,
Johnny."
crap." Yeah. But that's how he reemerged, and he became quite popular. He was probably one of the top 5 of the early Marvel characters. He shared a comic book with the Hulk for a long time. And then he got his own comic, and the Hulk got his own comic again. The Hulk had a 6-issue run in 1962 to 63, and it didn't go well, but people still loved the Hulk. So they not only put him in other comics like Spider-Man and Fantastic Four in guest roles, but they also put him in the Avengers, and then they gave him a strip again because people wanted more Hulk again. So he's done, I mean, the Hulk is easily probably one of the top 3 identifiable Marvel characters. If I had to say 3, I would say Wolverine, Spider-Man, and him. Easily, are the top 3. Spider-Man makes more money than Batman or Superman now in merchandise.
Oh, really?
Yes,
I believe that
by far. Yeah, and Spider-Man's first appearance, one of the best copies known to exist, to like a 9.6, which on a scale of 10. And it recently went for $3.2 million, which is more than either the first appearances of Batman or Superman have gone for. So it's pretty clear he's extremely popular, and people, for some reason, probably because we start reading comics when we're young, people really saw themselves in Peter Parker. I know I did as a kid. I always thought of myself as either the Human Torch or Spider-Man in my head. I didn't really think that, but I didn't light myself on fire or anything.
Oh, good, yeah.
Yeah. Do not try this at home, kids.
Please don't.
Yeah. I think I always thought of myself as like a cross between Luke Skywalker and Bilbo Baggins, but.
Let's see your feet. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah. Oh man. Oh, we've gotten a little far afield from Wakanda Forever.
Sorry about that.
Oh no worries. We circle around. It's just my job to bring us back.
I do believe this was more Submariner's movie than anyone else's, because they gave him such good backstory. His mother was a great character. I don't know. I really enjoyed that part of the movie the most. And well, it took me a while to catch up, to figure out what was really going on, because they did change the backstory so much. But, I really enjoyed it.
That scene where he had Shuri in the underground cave, and he was explaining his backstory, where we get so much of that backstory. The connection between the two of them, I thought was just fantastic. Mm-hmm. And that tension of the two wills, Shuri saying, "I will not let you harm that young girl," or as Okoye called her, very small girl or a very small woman or something.
Right.
That was small girl.
Yeah. Small girl. Yes. And on the other hand, Namor's just insistence that, we cannot allow the surface people to conquer and dominate us as they have in the past. And those two strong wills, and you can identify with both of them. And yeah, just wrestling through where is the solution to that kind of problem of you can't protect everybody, and yet you kind of have to, and I don't know.
You have to do your best, and that's all you can do, because you won't be able to protect everyone.
You brought up his mother as a character, and I really liked how they kind of transitioned into telling his story by Shuri was saying, well, you're a human, your mother was a human, and he's like, then she became something else, and Shuri's like, how? And he says this great line. He says, how is never as important as why. And and then he tells this story. But to me, I think a lot of people from Mesoamerica or who have that ancestry, especially here in the United States, can relate to that line, how is never as important as why. And maybe Andrew also, but the idea of the idea of immigration and how people's cultures have to change. People have to change in order to survive many times. And so how they do that is never as important as why. And that's kind of what I picked up from that line. Just bringing in the impact of colonization, and how many cultures we've lost over history because they've had to change to survive, Well,
the most important thing I think in this movie, and you kind of set it up for me, Angela, because it was right in that same period of the movie, is Namor clearly declares himself a mutant. And in Marvel Comics, now in the Ms. Marvel miniseries, first season of her regular series, she, at the end, it says she has mutated genes. They do not say she's a mutant, although that means she's a mutant.
They also play the X-Men animated series.
I know, which is wonderful. I mean,
that was awesome.
They had our number from the get-go. Yeah, they knew exactly what strings to play on the violin for us, to go jumping off the ship like the, siren song. But but no, him saying I'm a mutant sets everything up for the X-Men. And not only that, but Namor actually is in the comics. He is the first mutant, but they don't even say that in the comics until X-Men number 7, and so it came up in the X-Men. So someone was smart to think he was born with these powers because his father, who was a white man in the comics, married Atlantean woman, the queen or the princess of Atlantis at the time. And so that's how he came about, that's a true mutant. So when he says I'm a mutant, you could have sounded a gong and it wouldn't have been as loud as what it's going to mean for the future from here on out in the Marvel universe. So I just want to say that, because I had forgotten all about it until Angela went to that section of the film. Thank God.
Yeah, that's the first time in the whole MCU since they acquired Fox and were able to legally say mutant. That was the first time.
Word.
Right.
The M word.
Right.
Yeah.
They replaced it with Inhuman to a certain degree. At least they did in the S.H.I.E.L.D. TV series, which I loved, and I thought it was okay that they did that. But not only but they made it clear. So in the comics, Ms. Marvel is not a mutant. Ms. Marvel is an Inhuman. So it's kind of funny that they're flipping that when before everyone had to be an Inhuman. If they were talking about a mutated gene, it had to be that they were Inhuman, which meant that they had some kind of Kree signature to their blood.
Right.
Okay, yeah. I'm going far too geek. Sorry about that, but
I love it.
We're all going to have to know this eventually.
Yeah, I'm just giving you a precursor, things to look for.
part of what it's doing is setting up more Marvel movies.
Right.
Like, I mean, I liked the character of Riri Williams, but she felt a little bit shoehorned into the movie to my taste.
Oh, completely.
I agree.
And it's like, I almost wanted to say she seems like she's an important enough character, a big enough character that she should have had her own introduction in a movie of her own or something.
Or a series, at least. Like
Or a
on Disney
series,
Plus,
yeah.
right. Which is what they did with Ms. Marvel.
At the same time, you know, the Black Panther was introduced in, what was it, Civil War?
No,
Captain America Civil War, wasn't it?
It was Civil War, yeah.
Was it Civil War? Okay, yeah.
It was Civil War, yeah.
Yeah.
So I mean, there is this kind of tradition of introducing important characters in other major movies. So,
Well, but that's just like the comics. So Wolverine
suppose
first
that's true,
appeared.
too.
Wolverine first appeared in Hulk as the villain. Then they brought back and rejuvenated the X-Men, and they brought him in as one of the X-Men.
How could they make Wolverine a villain? He's Canadian. Canadians are also nice.
Oh, he's like the poster child for evil Canadian. You know, he can't help it. But originally, they were going to make him actually a evolved Wolverine, and thank God they didn't do that, because he wouldn't have been a mutant then. He would have been an evolved Wolverine. And
the character Wolverine would have been evolved from the animal
by
Wolverine.
the High Evolutionary,
Oh, I gotcha.
who's going to be the villain in an upcoming Marvel movie in the next Guardians of the Galaxy.
Wow.
Yeah.
Sorry, there's just so much. Well, it's funny.
It is. There's a ton to keep track
It
of.
is, and the Fantastic Four will launch a whole nother. Then you'll get Silver Surfer. Then you'll get Galactus. Then you'll get. Supposedly, I'm not saying this for true, but supposedly they've asked Keanu Reeves if he wants to be Galactus. And
That would be an interesting choice.
well, if you think about it, it makes sense because he played the lead in the remake of The Day the Earth Stood Still, where he was very much a judge of Earth, and should it be, blown up?
Forgot about that movie.
And that's kind of what Galactus does. Should I eat this planet or not? But, but there's a lot to look forward to when they do come out with the Fantastic Four. But all of this is being set up now, and Namor is a big part of the Fantastic Four story, the long story. So they're setting all this up to where they can just insert these characters like they were in the comics for the most part. Because if you think about it, they haven't tweaked a lot of the relationships very much. You might have someone of a different race or something playing a character that you didn't expect, but if you look at the character and how the character reacts and acts, it's pretty much completely based on their path in the comics. So they've been really good about that. They've changed a few radically, but only because they had to do it to fit the bigger story. But for the most part, I'm really looking forward to a lot of the new stuff they have coming out. Really looking forward to Quantumania. And that's just next week. So,
which is, yeah. And all the press I'm seeing about Quantumania is that it is going to be a major sort of world building game changer for the MCU, which is, again, kind of an odd choice. The first two Ant-Man movies were kind of leaning more on the comedic side and on the kind of not central to the main story. And so to see an Ant-Man and Wasp movie suddenly become central to the main thread of the MCU, I don't know.
Well, as Peyton Reed said, the director of the Ant-Man films, he's like, his first two films were like palate cleansers, after some crazy Avengers movie came out, like an Ant-Man movie would be like the palate cleanser. He's like, He's like, I only agreed to do the third one if I was able to have like an Avengers level threat, and they gave it to him. So yeah,
Okay.
looks like Kang is coming.
Yeah.
This is also a very early story in the Marvel Age. This actually appears in, I want to say, around Fantastic Four 18 and 19.
The Kang story, you mean?
No, it's not a Kang story. It's actually where they go to the microverse. And,
okay.
And that's what becomes all these other things, but it's Ant-Man with Reed Richards and everybody, and he shrinks everybody down, so they all go down. So it's basically the Fantastic Fours who should be with him when he goes down there, but instead, of course, it's the original Wasp and Ant-Man, and then the new Wasp, and then Scott's daughter. But otherwise, it should be the Fantastic Four going with them. That's the way it was in the comics. But this is and Kang had nothing to do with it. As far as I remember. Yeah, Kang first appeared in one of the first 10 issues of the Avengers. And here's something interesting. He, Doctor Doom, and oh my gosh, Rama Tut were all supposed to be the same person. And they've changed that since then, but they were all supposed to be a different era of the person that started out as Doctor Doom. So Kang is actually a reflection of Doctor Doom in a way, although Doctor Doom hasn't even shown up yet, and neither is Rama Tut. But,
well, that might be a spoiler alert for somebody who hasn't seen some of the other MCU movies. I don't know if anybody listening to this might be like, what is this Kang thing they're talking about?
Oh, well, I'm sorry. Well, you'll find out next week, folks.
You'll find out. He's in all the trailers.
No, actually, Kang was in Loki.
A version of him.
Yeah, Kang was in Loki.
Yeah.
And I will say this, Jonathan Majors is fantastic. I loved him in Lovecraft Country. I don't know if you guys saw that, but that was a wonderful series. It was very short, only like 10 episodes, I think, but it was amazing. And it really confronted race issues, more so than Wakanda Forever, because you don't really, race is never really a factor in Wakanda because they're like the best country in the world, as they're depicted in the comics and in the movies now. So they're like, and they were never colonized, so there's a lot of things that make them so different as a country. And these are things that I had thought they might bring up more in the new movie, and they did. They did. I mean, it's very, very easy to see that scientifically they're head and shoulders above even the U.S.
Well, and that was definitely part of the first Black Panther movie. That was, Killmonger's motivation was, why are you so isolated when people who look like us are being oppressed all over the planet? And Namor had a similar argument,
right.
These surface dwellers have, come in and conquered and oppressed people all over the place. And, it's us or them, or it's us versus them. And the fact is, history is really complex, right?
Yeah. I mean, even here in San Antonio, Texas, where I live, we have 5 Spanish missions here, and there is a sense of loss and perhaps anger and frustration in some of the indigenous people whose ancestors lived in the mission, but at the same time there's also people of the same situation who embrace the faith that their ancestors, took on. And, just last week I was at a mass where they were celebrating their church's patron's feast day. And here in San Antonio, especially for the feast days where the patron is of Mexican descent or was in Mexico, you see the matachinas, which are the traditional dancers that come in and do the indigenous dancing with a traditional costume and the drums and everything as part of the mass itself, as well as afterwards or before. And that's very, very common here. So the way to kind of, look at, well, is it bad or good, right? As you're saying, it's very complicated. And I think ultimately the best thing that we can choose to do is to try to, heal as much as we can. Like, we were kind of saying at the beginning that you go through all this suffering in your life and you have a choice. Do you become bitter from it? Or do you try to bring about true justice for everyone? Do you try to bring about healing for as many people as possible, including yourself, and probably starting with yourself, right? So, that's kind of how I sort of came at this movie, was just that personal background, and then just loving, I haven't mentioned it yet, but loving to see people that look like my family on the big screen and being taken seriously, using the Mayan language. That was awesome.
Are your family blue? No, I'm kidding. Sorry. I had to say that. They look a little different than Hispanics. They've got the blue thing going instead of the brown thing. But
yeah, but the facial features, right? I mean, I don't see that, in movies.
Oh yeah. Oh no, absolutely. And I totally agree with you. I'm just kidding around. But yeah. No. What I did like was they made him very different than the rest, just like they did in the comics. Now, in the comics, they came out around the same time as World War II, or right before it. And so what happened was the Atlanteans looked very much like a caricature of the Japanese, where they would make the Japanese look like devils and they'd have great big eyes. And so a lot of the Atlanteans look like that. And so it's very easy to see that they were supposed to be something akin to, another race that could be compared to like the Japanese, because they wanted to invade us also. So I think a lot of Namor's roots are probably somewhere in that zone, but I do think it fits much better for the big screen that it turned out like it did, like you were saying, because they did need a strong, and of course you have America from Doctor Strange, and it's nice to see they're really paying attention and trying to bring the Hispanic characters to the forefront.
Yeah, they wouldn't be Hispanic, but they would be.
Oh yes,
Hispanic
right.
would be Spanish, but yeah.
Yes,
so
you're right. I apologize.
No worries.
Please correct me if you don't.
I educate when I can.
But, yeah.
Just want to mention one thing that I think it was a cool opportunity for them. I think set up by DC's Aquaman, because they have such similar backgrounds in the comics. Like they both come from Atlantis. They're both half human, half Atlantean. They
were only created a year apart, by the way, too. Aquaman's from 1940, believe it or not. And
maybe there was something in the water.
Well, I think DC basically ripped off the Submariner, if you will.
There was a lot of there's a lot of ripping off going on between DC and Marvel, and especially in the Golden and Silver Age.
Well, in Marvel, they had the Wizard instead of the Flash.
Flash,
which the Wizard is kind of a problematic name. but sounds like someone who drank too much beer. But no, in fact, the Wizard made a brief appearance in Jessica Jones, the final season, or not the final, the second season of Jessica Jones. And he was this kind of overweight guy with glasses, and he was super fast. But they said, "How did you get fast?" He goes, "My mongoose bit me." And that's how the 1940s character got his powers, was by being bitten by a mongoose. So it's really funny that they do make sure that they use as many of these characters as they can. But the wonderful part to me is that you don't know how they're going to appear. You don't know how they're going to tweak it. And that's the fun for me to see these movies and to see. And Namor was the biggest example of that, Angela, I think, was he changed, but he didn't change that much. He still has the temperament and the ego of the Namor in comics. I tried. I failed miserably, but I really tried. I can't roll my R's.
Well, and that's one of the things about Marvel in general is they kind of run the gamut from the sublime to the ridiculous, and they don't deny any of it. They try to incorporate it. They don't go terribly deep, but at least they touch on some of the complexity, and they don't completely shy away from the complexity of the real world issues that they're kind of pointing to or referencing. I think there's a lot more we could talk about. Certainly, I would love to keep talking all night, but we do have a time limit here.
Yes, we do.
So I think the question now is for all of you listeners, what did you think of Black Panther: Wakanda Forever? We would love to hear your thoughts and questions and insights. You can email us at secrets@sqpn.com, or you can leave a comment on our website at sqpn.com/secrets. We're also on social media at facebook.com/starquestmedia, or on Twitter at SQPN. And please join our Discord server at sqpn.com/discord. You can be sure to subscribe to our show. We're on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Stitcher, TuneIn, Spotify, iHeartRadio. You can find us anywhere. We're even on YouTube. You can find previous episodes of this show at sqpn.com/secrets. I want to take a moment to thank our patrons who make it possible for us to create Secrets of Movies and TV shows, as well as all our other SQPN shows. Their generous donations at sqpn.com/give make us possible to continue producing these podcasts. You can join them by visiting sqpn.com/give. So until next time, Andrew, thank you for joining today's panel.
Thanks for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Angela, it's been great discussing Wakanda Forever with you.
Yeah, thanks so much, Robert.
And Bill, it's been terrific having you on the show. Welcome to the SQPN family.
Hey, thank you so much, Robert. It's been a real honor. I really enjoyed hanging out with you guys. Thank you.
Right on. And once again, I've been Robert King. Thank you for listening to The Secrets of Movies and TV Shows on StarQuest.
Here's another show on the StarQuest network you're sure to enjoy, The Secrets of Star Trek. Find it wherever fine podcasts are found or at sqpn.com/Star Trek.